My girlfriend said I had no future, so I built one without her, and her mom begged me back. You're just wasting my best years, Mary said, staring straight through me like I was a mistake she regretted. Her voice was cold, sharp enough to slice through whatever future I thought we had. I stood there with the tiny velvet box in my pocket, the ring I'd been saving up for months to buy. But hearing her say that, it felt like the earth under my feet simply gave up. I laughed quietly, mostly at myself. I thought we were building something together, I said, my voice low, raw. Mary crossed her arms, her expensive bracelet catching the light. Larry, you have no future, no stability, no ambition. I can't keep playing house with a dreamer. The words didn't just sting, they hollowed me out. All around us, the city buzzed like it didn't care. Somewhere, music played from a passing car. A couple laughed walking by. The world moved on, as if my heart hadn't just been cracked open at the seams. I wanted to argue, to tell her about the sleepless nights I spent working 2 jobs, about the small apartment lease I had just signed in our name, about the business plan sitting in my drawer. But looking at her now, her eyes glinting with impatience, I realized it wouldn't matter. She had already decided. You'll regret this someday, I said quietly, not out of spite, but almost like a fact. She smiled, a sad, pitying thing, and turned away. I watched her go. I watched the woman I had built every stupid dream around disappear into a crowd that seemed ready to swallow her whole. For a long time, I didn't move. The velvet box felt heavier in my pocket. Everything I thought I knew about love, about loyalty, collapsed inside me without making a sound. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had no future. But standing there in the middle of the city I couldn't afford to live in yet, with a heart that suddenly felt too big for my chest, I decided something. If I didn't have a future, I would build one. One that would never, ever need her in it again. The first time I met Mary, she was sitting on the hood of a rusted car behind the diner where I worked, kicking her legs back and forth like she didn't have a care in the world. She had this confidence about her, the kind that didn't need to be announced. It just settled around her like sunlight. Back then, I didn't have much. A beat-up truck that stalled half the time, a job that barely paid the bills. A handful of dreams that sounded ridiculous when I said them out loud. But when Mary smiled at me that day, wide and fearless, I really believed that none of it mattered. I was 20, scraping by with night shifts and side gigs, always chasing some vague, better life I couldn't quite see. Mary was 19, studying business at the community college, already talking about big cities and bigger futures. She loved to talk about the life she was going to have, the apartments with floor-to-ceiling windows, the vacations in places that sounded like fairy tales. I loved to listen. Maybe because deep down I thought if she stayed close to me, I might find a way to give her those things one day. The first time she called me her boyfriend, I had just fixed her car for free. She kissed me right there in the lot, tasting like mint and recklessness. She laughed when I got grease on her cheek and said, "Guess I'm stuck with you now." I think part of me always knew Mary was looking past me, even when she was looking right at me. She wanted a future that sparkled, and no matter how much I wiped my hands clean, I still had dirt under my nails. But I loved her. God, I loved her. More than anything else I had ever loved in my life, and I believed that was enough. For the first 2 years, it was good. We dreamed together. She would talk about her plans, and I would tell her mine, and somehow in the middle, we'd find a way to meet. We lived cheap, ate ramen noodles, bought secondhand furniture. I remember saving for months to buy her a necklace for our anniversary. She wore it every day for almost a year until one day it just disappeared. When I asked about it, she shrugged and said she lost it at the gym. That was the first time I felt a crack. I didn't press. Love, I thought, meant not asking too. Many questions. But slowly, little things began to change. Mary stopped riding in my truck because it was embarrassing. She didn't want to bring her college friends around because she said they were judgmental. When I told her about the photography business I wanted to start, she smiled politely and then changed the subject. as if she didn't believe it could ever be real, and still, I stayed. Because I thought love meant holding on even when it hurt. By the time I was 26, the differences between us were getting harder to ignore. She was always dressed in polished outfits now, working part-time internships in sleek downtown offices. I was still wearing secondhand shirts, fixing cars, in a friend's garage to make rent while saving every spare dollar to launch my dream. The night she called me a burden during a fight about money was the night I almost walked away. But then she cried, told me she didn't mean it, that she was just scared about the future, and I stayed. Because I believe people said things they didn't mean when they were scared. I believed love could survive fear. What a fool I was. In the 6th year, I finally scraped together enough to show her that I could build something. I signed a lease for a small studio space, bought equipment, printed flyers. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I wanted to propose. I thought if she saw how far I had come, how much I had built for us, she'd believe in me again. That was the night I bought the ring. That was the night she told me I had no future. She didn't even know about the studio, about the contract I had just landed with a local real estate company to take photos for all their listings, about the small but steady list of clients I had started to build. She didn't ask. She didn't want to know. I wasn't part of her vision anymore. I watched her walk away without looking back, heels clicking sharply against the sidewalk, and I realized something else. Mary hadn't fallen out of love with me. She had fallen in love with the version of me she thought could make her dreams easier. And when it became clear she might have to wait, or worse, struggle, she decided it wasn't worth it. I went home that night and placed the ring on the kitchen table. I stared at it for a long time, wondering how I could have been so wrong. Maybe it wasn't just that I had no future. Maybe it was that she couldn't see herself building one with someone who hadn't already made it. Either way, the message was clear. And I was done trying to change her mind. I would build the life she thought I could never have. But not for her, stop. A week after Mary left, I officially opened my studio. No grand opening, no banners. Just a small sign in the window that read, Larry Bennett Photography, open for business. It didn't look like much compared to the downtown offices Mary used to talk about, but it was mine. It was real. And for the first time in months, I felt like maybe I wasn't completely lost. Still, every night when I closed the metal shutter and locked the door, I fought the urge to check my phone, to see if she had called. She never did. Not once. Instead, I kept my head down and worked. I took photos of apartments, catalogs, food menus, portraits, anything that paid. Some nights I barely slept, some days I barely ate. But the more I poured into it, the more real it became. Clients started recommending me. Money started trickling in. It wasn't enough to make me rich, not yet. But it was enough to prove to myself that I could do it. Then one evening, about 2 months after the break, Mary showed up at the studio door. I was adjusting a lighting rig when I saw her reflection in the glass. For a second, I thought I was imagining her. She stood there in a tight black dress, hair pinned up, lips painted red, looking like a stranger dressed in a memory. I hesitated before opening the door. "Hey," she said, the corners of her mouth twitching into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Hey," I replied, my voice colder than I intended. I didn't step aside to let her in. She cleared her throat. I heard you opened your studio. Congratulations." I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. She shifted on her heels, glancing past me at the modest space. No chandeliers, no marble floors. Just a small place built with stubbornness and unpaid overtime. "You've been doing good," she said, a little surprised, as if she had expected to find me still sitting on a curb somewhere with a broken camera and empty pockets. I didn't answer. I didn't owe her explanations. She faltered, then took a deep breath. "I'm actually here because my company is looking for a photographer for our fall catalog." Her words hit like a slap I hadn't seen coming. After all the nights I spent doubting myself, fighting to stand again, she was standing here treating me like a convenience. like I was just another number she could plug into her perfect plans. "No," I said, my voice steady. She blinked. "Larry, come on. It's a huge opportunity for you." "No," I repeated. The silence between us stretched, tight and heavy. Her eyes narrowed slightly, the polite mask slipping. "Why are you being so stubborn? I'm trying to help you." "Help?" The word tasted bitter in my mouth. "You're not here to help me," I said, my voice low. "You're here because it's easy. Because you think you can use me now that I'm worth something." Mary's face flushed, with anger. "That's not fair," I shrugged. "Neither was throwing away 6 years because I wasn't fast enough for you." The words hung in the air like broken glass. She opened her mouth to argue, but for once she had nothing to say. She looked at me, really looked. And maybe for the first time, she saw it. The line she had crossed. The place where we could no longer meet. I thought she might apologize. I thought maybe she'd say she was wrong, that she missed me. But all she said was, "Good luck, Larry." And then she left, no turning back, no second chance. When the door clicked shut behind her, it felt permanent. And still, somewhere deep inside, it hurt more than I wanted to admit. The days that followed were a blur of work and quiet anger. I buried myself in projects. Every click of the shutter felt like defiance. Every invoice sent was another nail sealing off the part of my heart that had once belonged to her. But the universe had a cruel sense of humor. Because 2 weeks later, I was invited to an upscale business event, not as a guest, but as the event's official photographer, and Mary was there. She wasn't alone. She stood beside a man in an expensive suit, his hand casually resting on the small of her back. Brian. I recognized him instantly. The name had come up once before, back when we were still together. He was the son of her mother's business partner, the kind of guy who never had to build anything because everything was handed to him on a silver tray. Their laughter carried across the room, light and effortless. Watching her look at him, the way she used to look at me burned more than I cared to admit. When her eyes met mine across the room, something shifted. For the briefest moment, there was a flicker. Regret, maybe, before she quickly looked away. I raised my camera, focused, and took the shot because I had a job to do, and Mary was no longer part of it. The flashes from my camera lit the room in bursts. Every click felt mechanical, like my hands had learned to work even though my heart wasn't in it. Across the crowded event hall, Mary smiled brightly at Brian, slipping her hand into his as if she had never known me at all. I lowered my camera for a second, the strap digging into my neck as I tried to steady the sudden rush of emotions. I thought I was past this. I thought I had buried whatever parts of me still cared. But seeing her there, so radiant, so easily replacing me, made the air in the room feel thinner, harder to breathe. I forced my feet to move, working through the crowd, snapping photos of guests I didn't know, faces that blurred together in a sea of polished suits and glittering dresses. All the while, a part of me stayed locked on her, like a splinter I couldn't pull out. After the event, I sat alone in my studio, the photos uploading slowly onto the screen. I leaned back in the chair, the glow from the monitor casting long shadows across the empty room. My phone buzzed with notifications, new gigs, invoices, client messages. I ignored them. Instead, my eyes found the tiny velvet box shoved into the corner of the desk drawer. The ring. I hadn't been able to throw it away. I told myself it didn't matter anymore, but the truth was, a part of me had been carrying that weight like an old scar that refused to fade. I picked up the box, turning it over in my hands. It was so small, so stupid. How could something this small have meant everything? Memories came rushing back without permission. Mary curled up beside me on the old couch, half asleep, mumbling about future houses and kids. Mary dancing barefoot in the kitchen, laughing as flour dusted her nose. Mary in a worn-out hoodie, stealing fries off my plate during our late-night diner runs. Was any of it real? Or was I always just a placeholder until something better came along? I closed the box and shoved it deep into the drawer, slamming it shut. I didn't want memories. I wanted a future. The next few weeks, I worked like a man possessed. I barely slept. I took every job, every project, every opportunity. I built contacts. I learned new editing techniques. I upgraded my equipment. Clients started noticing, started talking. Some even said my work had soul, the kind of emotion that couldn't be faked. Maybe Heartbreak was good for business after all. And then came Tracy. I met her at a charity event I was photographing, the last place I expected to meet anyone. She wasn't flashy like Mary. She wasn't dressed to impress. Tracy wore a simple blue dress and laughed too loud at bad jokes. She didn't pretend to be perfect. She didn't pretend at all. She asked me about my camera gear, genuinely curious, and listened when I explained. She smiled when I got technical, not because she understood, but because she could see how much it mattered to me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like I had to prove my worth. I felt seen. We talked for hours after the event ended, sitting on the curb outside the building, sharing bad coffee and worse stories about life. She didn't ask about Mary. I didn't volunteer. It felt good to have something new, something clean, untouched by the past. And yet, late at night, when I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, doubt still crawled in like a slow poison. What if I wasn't enough? What if I was just fooling myself again? What if all I would ever be was almost good enough? The fear was a familiar one, an old enemy I thought I had left behind, but now it wore a different face. Not Mary's. Mine. It wasn't her voice telling me I couldn't make it anymore. It was my own. Some nights I fought it. Some nights I lost. But every morning, I woke up and tried again. And slowly, painfully, something inside me started to shift. I wasn't building a future to prove anything to her anymore. I was building it because I deserved to. I deserved a life that wasn't measured by someone else's standards. I deserved dreams that didn't have to fit inside anyone else's box. I deserved to be loved, not for what I could become, but for who I already was. And for the first time, I believed I might actually get there. Not because of Mary, not even because of Tracy, but because somewhere along the way, after all the heartbreak and betrayal, I had finally started choosing myself. And maybe that was the future worth fighting for all along. It was a Sunday afternoon when my phone rang, buzzing insistently on the workbench beside me. I wiped my hands on a rag and grabbed it without checking the caller ID. I was halfway through editing a set of engagement photos for a new client, feeling unusually light, almost happy. Then I heard the voice on the other end. Larry. It's me. Mary's mom. I froze, the room tilting slightly around me. It had been months since I'd even thought about Mary's family. I hadn't realized how completely I had shut that part of my life away until now. I know it's sudden, she continued, her voice trembling. But can we meet, please? It's important. I hesitated, the weight of the past pressing down heavy on my chest. Part of me wanted to hang up, to leave every piece of that world behind and never look back. But something in her voice, desperation maybe, made it impossible to say. An hour later, I sat across from her at a small coffee shop near the river. She looked older than I remembered, her makeup carefully applied but unable to hide the exhaustion lining her face. I wouldn't have called you, she said quickly, almost defensively, if it weren't serious. I said nothing, waiting. She took a shaky breath. Larry. Mary's not doing well. I didn't know what response she expected from me. Sympathy, concern, anger. I gave her none of it. I just waited. She's lost everything, her mother whispered. After she broke up with you, she and Brian got serious, but things didn't go the way she thought. The words hit me harder than I cared to admit. What happened? I asked, my voice flat. Her mother twisted a napkin between her fingers. Brian's family used her, strung her along with promises they never intended to keep. When she wasn't useful anymore, he dumped her. Publicly, humiliatingly. She paused, her eyes glassy. She lost her job, her reputation, her apartment. She's living. Back with me now, barely speaking, barely eating. I clenched my jaw, 1,000 conflicting emotions warring inside me. Guilt wasn't one of them. I know you don't owe her anything, her mother continued, her voice breaking. But you were always the one who believed in her. You were always the one who loved her when no one else did. Maybe if you talk to her, she'll find her way back. I leaned back in my chair, the coffee cooling untouched in front of me. For a long time, I didn't say anything, because the truth was, part of me still remembered the girl I had loved. The girl who had once danced barefoot in my kitchen, laughing at nothing. The girl who had whispered promises into my ear in the middle of the night. But that girl had made her choice. She had thrown away everything we had for the glittering promise of something shinier, faster, easier. And now, when all the glitter had turned to dust, they expected me to sweep up the pieces. I'm sorry, I said quietly, standing up. But Mary's future isn't my responsibility anymore. Her mother's face crumpled, but I didn't stay to watch it fall apart. Outside, the winter air bit at my skin, sharp and clean. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and walked away without looking back. Inside my chest, the final thread tying me to Mary snapped, silent and complete. There would be no rescue, no return, no second chance. Not this time. The day of my solo exhibition arrived faster than I expected. It wasn't a massive gallery downtown or some swanky art studio with champagne and critics. It was a small rented hall, walls lined with years of photographs, moments of laughter, sorrow, victory, loss. Pieces of life stitched together frame by frame, image by image, all leading to this. I adjusted my tie awkwardly, feeling out of place in the rented suit. Tracy stood beside me, radiant in a simple navy dress, her hand slipping into mine when she saw me fidget. You ready? She whispered. I wasn't sure if anyone was ever ready for moments like this, but I nodded anyway. People began to arrive. Not a flood, this wasn't that kind of event, but a steady stream of friends, clients, acquaintances, faces I had photographed, families whose stories I had captured, even a few strangers who had heard about the exhibit through word of mouth. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. For the first time, people saw me, not just the man behind the camera, but the man who had built something from nothing. Halfway through the evening, as I was explaining the story behind one of my favorite pieces, I saw her, Mary. She stood near the entrance, hesitant, almost blending into the crowd. Her hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail. No designer dress, no flashy jewelry. Just Mary, stripped of the armor she used to wear so proudly. Our eyes met across the room. For a moment, the noise around me faded. The conversations, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, all of it dissolved into silence. Tracy followed my gaze and stiffened slightly beside me. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. Mary moved slowly through the crowd, her steps small, uncertain. She stopped a few feet away, her fingers twisting the strap of her purse. Hi, she said softly. Hi, I replied. My voice, calm, steady. You've done well, she said, her eyes flickering around the room, taking in the photos, the people admiring them. I didn't respond. I didn't need her approval anymore. I'm proud of you, she said after a moment, her voice breaking slightly. A long silence stretched between us. She took a shaky breath. I made a mistake, she said, her voice trembling. I see that now. I was selfish, blind. I didn't believe in you when I should have. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the cracks she had tried so hard to hide. the regrets etched into the corners of her eyes, the weight she carried on her shoulders. Once, I would have given anything to hear her say these words. Once, I would have begged for them. Now they only made me sad. I know, I said quietly. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she blinked them back fiercely. Larry, I don't expect you to forgive me. I had to tell you. I had to say it. I nodded. Thank you for saying it. She looked like she wanted to say more, but then she noticed Tracy standing by my side, her arm looped gently through mine, her presence steady and warm. Mary's face crumpled for a fraction of a second before she masked it with a small, brittle smile. You're happy, she whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. I am, I said simply. She nodded again, swallowing hard. I hope, she started, then stopped. I hope you have everything you ever dreamed of. I smiled, a real smile, not bitter or cruel, just honest. I already do. Mary pressed her lips together, trying to keep herself together. She looked around one last time, taking it all in. The success she had once thought impossible, the life she had once walked away from. I should go, she said. Take care, Mary, I said softly. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd as quietly as she had arrived. I watched her go, feeling nothing, no anger, no regret, just peace. When I turned back, Tracy was watching me, a question in her eyes she didn't voice. I pulled her closer, resting my forehead against hers. You're my future, I whispered. She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes, and nodded. The rest of the night blurred into a beautiful haze. Congratulations, smiles, even a few business offers. Later, when the hall had emptied and the lights had dimmed, I stood alone in front of one photo. A black and white shot of an empty street at sunrise, soft light breaking through the cracks of a worn city. It wasn't a glamorous picture. It wasn't flashy or staged, but it was real. It was hope rising from ruin, just like me. A soft knock sounded at the door. I turned to see Tracy leaning against the frame, her jacket draped over her arm. Ready to go, Mr. Bennett? She teased. I laughed, shaking my head. Yeah, let's go home. Home. Not just a place. Not just walls and windows. Home was a person. Home was her. As we stepped into the crisp night air, Tracy slipped her hand into mine. Again, and I knew. No matter what the world threw at me next, no matter how many storms came, I would never be lost again, because I had found my future, and this time, I built it with my own 2 hands, and it was strong enough to never be taken away. 3 months after the exhibition, I got the invitation. It was sent to my studio by courier, neatly sealed with embossed gold lettering, the annual Business Leaders Gala, hosted by Luxton Corporation. A black tie event for entrepreneurs, industry leaders, and artists who had made an impact in the past year. Apparently, someone thought I belonged among them now. I almost laughed when I opened it. 2 years ago, I would have thrown it away, thinking it was a mistake. Now, it felt like proof. Proof that all the nights spent working until my hands cramped, all the mornings waking up alone with nothing but ambition to keep me warm, were worth it. Tracy was more excited than I was. She spent days hunting down the perfect dress, teasing me about getting a proper tux instead of trying to rent one last minute. On the night of the gala, when she stepped out in a deep emerald gown, I forgot how to breathe for a moment. You're going to cause a traffic jam just walking through the doors, I said, grinning. She laughed and looped her arm through mine. Only if you cause one too. The gala was held at the Grand Marlowe Hotel, a towering glass building that gleamed against the night sky like a crown. Inside, the chandeliers glittered, and the air smelled like expensive perfume and ambition. I moved through the crowd, exchanging nods and polite small talk, feeling different, confident, grounded, like I finally belonged in a room like this, not because of who I knew or who I was dating, but because of what I had built. And then, of course, fate threw one last test at me. Mary was there. I spotted her across the room, standing stiffly beside a man I didn't recognize. Her dress was beautiful, her hair styled perfectly, but there was something hollow in the way she smiled. Like the sparkle she used to chase had dulled somewhere along the way. She saw me, too. For a moment, her face froze. Then she straightened her shoulders and started toward me, every step heavy with hesitation. I didn't move. When she finally reached me, she opened her mouth to speak, but Tracy beat her to it. "Hi," Tracy said, her voice polite but firm, slipping easily between us. "I'm Tracy, Larry's fiancé." The words landed like a thunderclap. Fiancé. Mary blinked, her hands clenching around her clutch purse. She recovered quickly, pasting on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Congratulations," she said stiffly. "Thank you," Tracy replied sweetly, but there was steel under her words. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Everything important had already been said between us long ago. Mary hesitated, her eyes flickering between us, searching, maybe hoping for a crack, a hesitation, a sign that I hadn't moved on as fully as it looked, but there was nothing left for her to find. "You look successful," she said finally, voice low. I smiled, easy and genuine. "I am." Mary's lips trembled slightly. "I'm happy for you." I nodded once. "I hope you find your happiness too." It wasn't sarcasm. It wasn't spite. It was the kind of clean, detached goodbye that came from true closure. She stepped back, looking small and fragile under the glittering lights. And then, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd like a shadow at sunset. Tracy squeezed my hand lightly. "You okay?" she asked softly. I looked at her. The woman who had stood beside me when I had nothing to offer but a broken heart and a dream, and felt a deep, solid peace settle in my chest. "Never better," I said. We spent the rest of the evening laughing, dancing, making memories that didn't have anything to do with the past. A few weeks later, the news broke that Mary's new company had collapsed. Rumors swirled. Mismanagement. Poor investment scandal. Her new boyfriend, the man she had clung to like a lifeboat, was indicted for embezzlement. His betrayal wasn't clean or quiet. It dragged everyone connected to him into the mud, including Mary. Her name was splashed across headlines for weeks, not as a rising star, but as a cautionary tale. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't need to. Life had already taken care of everything far more efficiently than I ever could. Sometimes, the best revenge wasn't about gloating or proving a point. Sometimes the best revenge was living well, thriving, building a future so bright, the people who doubted you had no choice but to squint when they looked at you. A month after that, Tracy and I got married. It wasn't a grand wedding. It didn't need to be. Just close friends, family, laughter, and vows whispered so softly they felt like promises made under the stars. I kissed my wife under a shower of petals and cheers, and in that moment, I understood. Every broken night, every lonely morning, every step away from a life that wasn't meant for me, it had all been leading here. To this. To her. To us. Later that night, as we sat together on the balcony of our small home, watching the stars blink into life overhead, Tracy rested her head against my shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for choosing me." I turned and kissed her temple. "No. Thank you for choosing me." The wind carried away our laughter and the city lights flickered in the distance, but in that moment the whole world felt small, quiet, ours. I didn't need anything else. Not revenge, not validation, not even the past. Because I wasn't chasing anything anymore. I had already won. Description: I gave her 6 years of my life, believing we would build a future together, but I was only a substitute in her eyes. When she said I had no future, I decided to create one without her. I built everything she thought I never could, and when she lost everything, it was already too late. Watching her beg for the life she once threw away was the closure I never knew I needed. This is the story of how I turned heartbreak into power. A betrayal, revenge story. Moving on, success, after heartbreak. Emotional journey tags breakup revenge story. Emotional breakup journey, ex regrets losing me, heartbreak to success, substitute love story, dramatic love betrayal, girlfriend chose wrong. Guy, emotional love closure, painful breakup recovery, moving on from betrayal, self-growth after breakup, true love after heartbreak, broken engagement story, emotional success journey, romance drama storytelling, powerful love story revenge, healing after toxic love, building, a future alone, ex-girlfriend regret story, second chance love story,